There are moments in life you can pinpoint down to the second, the breath before something snaps, the blink before everything tilts. For me, it was a quiet Wednesday morning. I was rinsing out my coffee mug when Leanna texted, asking if I could grab her sunglasses from the car. Said she was heading to the optometrist and forgot them in the glove compartment. Nothing unusual. I'd done stuff like that for her 1,000 times. It was mid-June. The air already felt heavy, thick with that lazy kind of heat that makes everything feel just a little off. I grabbed the keys, slipped on some sandals, and headed out to the driveway. Her car was unlocked. That stopped me. Leanna was borderline obsessive about locking her car. I used to joke that she could hear a mosquito buzz inside if she forgot to double-click the fob. Even in our quiet, leafy suburb, she never left her vehicle unsecured. I figured maybe she got distracted. Maybe she meant to lock it and just didn't. But the thought stuck in my brain like a sliver. I opened the passenger door and bent over to get to the glove compartment. That's when I found it. Not the sunglasses. A small black velvet pouch, soft and weighty in my hand. Familiar in a way I didn't want it to be. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed not to open it. Like by doing so, I was crossing some invisible line, stepping into a moment I couldn't come back from. But I did it anyway. Inside was Leanna's wedding ring. Her wedding ring. It hit me like a punch. I just stood there, staring down at this thing that should never be anywhere but her finger. Leanna didn't take it off. Not for showers. Not for sleep. Not for anything. I remembered the day I put it on her hand. I remembered how she used to spin it around when she was nervous or absent-minded. And now it was here, wrapped in velvet, hidden in her glove compartment like something she was done with. Next to it was a silver chain, thin and elegant, with a small key-shaped pendant hanging at the end. It wasn't hers, or at least not anything I'd ever seen her wear. Leanna's jewelry tastes were simple. Golds, muted tones, and nothing too symbolic. This pendant looked delicate but specific, like it meant something. That was the first crack. The first fracture in the image I had of my life. A marriage that had weathered 2 decades. A home built brick by brick with trust. And a woman I thought I knew better than anyone. I held both items for a while, letting the air settle around me. I didn't feel angry yet, just off. Like I was trying to find my balance on a boat that had started rocking ever so slightly. I placed everything back exactly how I found it and closed the compartment. Then I locked the car because she would have wanted that. I walked back into the house, sunglasses in hand, heart beating loud enough to drown out my thoughts. That evening, Leanna came home like she always did. Slightly flushed from the sun, sunglasses perched on her head, a pharmacy bag in hand with her new prescription lenses. She gave me a kiss, the casual kind, light and automatic. We had leftover pasta for dinner. She laughed at something on her phone and asked if we should start watching that new series everyone kept recommending. Everything was normal. Too normal. I waited until we were doing dishes before I asked. "Your ring wasn't on earlier," I said, trying to keep it casual. "In the car." She didn't flinch. Not a blink. "Oh," she said with a small shrug. "Yeah, it slipped off during yoga class last week. I didn't want to lose it again, so I kept it in the car for now. Figured I'd take it to get resized." Smooth. Practiced. I nodded, drying a plate, pretending that made sense. "What about the necklace?" I asked next, more gently. "The one with the key." This time she smiled. Not nervous. Not surprised. "Picked it up at a boutique downtown," she said. "You know me and cute little charms." It reminded me of those old skeleton keys my grandmother used to collect. Sentimental, I guess. She dried her hands and leaned in to kiss my cheek. "Why? Did it spook you?" she asked, laughing. "You looked like you saw a ghost when I came in." I forced a chuckle. "No. Just surprised, that's all." The thing was, Leanna had never been that into charms. And she didn't go downtown often without me. And she certainly never took her wedding ring off for yoga. She used to joke that it gave her balance during tree pose. But I didn't press. I didn't accuse. I just let it sit. I watched her later that night as she scrolled through her phone in bed. Her face was relaxed, content. She laughed softly at something, turned to show me a video of a dog playing piano. I nodded, smiled, but I wasn't really watching. My mind was on that pouch, that ring, that key. I didn't sleep that night, not really. Just lay there, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing, wondering if I had stepped into someone else's life by accident. One where I didn't know my wife. One where the things I'd believed for 20 years were slowly slipping through my fingers. I didn't know what the key unlocked, but something had already been opened, and there was no closing it again. That night, after Leanna fell asleep beside me, I stared up at the ceiling like it might give me some kind of answer. I kept telling myself it was just a ring, just a necklace. But deep down, I knew better. By morning, the weight of it hadn't lessened. It settled behind my ribs, heavy and quiet, like a passenger who didn't plan to leave. I went through the motions, coffee, headlines, feeding the dog, but nothing felt grounded. My thoughts kept circling the same drain. That ring was the first loose thread. But once I pulled it, more started to unravel. There were the phone habits, for one. A few months back, she'd started putting her phone on airplane mode in the evenings. She said it helped her disconnect. I'd actually admired her for it at first, thought she was just taking time to be present, to breathe. But now it felt more like a shield than a choice. Airplane mode didn't block distractions, it blocked discovery. Then there was the wine. Leanna used to love wine at home. She had a little tasting notebook and everything. It became a tradition, trying a new bottle on Fridays, rating the flavors, arguing playfully about which one paired better with pasta or pizza. But that stopped. She said she was cutting back. Said it made her sleepy. And yet, her work events had suddenly turned into regular wine tastings. It's for networking, she'd say, her tone so smooth, so matter-of-fact, it almost made me feel silly for questioning it. She used to come back from those events flushed, a little tipsy, humming as she changed out of her clothes. Now she came back late. Quiet. Her breath smelled like mint gum and her smile didn't reach her eyes. One night, she got home and I hugged her. Just routine. She stiffened slightly, then relaxed. But I smelled it, another man's cologne. Not strong, but unfamiliar. Sharp, expensive, and definitely not mine. She said it was from a seating arrangement at a conference. You know how packed those tables are, she added, laughing it off. Guy next to me spilled water and got a little too friendly with his elbows. It made sense. Except it didn't. Not really. Another time she lost her fitness tracker. Said it slipped off at yoga. Then she found it again, tucked inside a jacket pocket she must have forgotten she wore. Twice. That happened twice. I didn't push, but both times her explanations felt like puzzles with missing pieces. I wanted to believe her. I kept telling myself, don't be paranoid. Don't let suspicion twist everything. But suspicion was already twisting. The memory that really shook something loose came from 2 months earlier. She'd gone away for a weekend to help her mom recover from a small procedure. Said it was just an overnight stay, nothing major. I even packed her bag for her while she made breakfast. That's how normal it felt. A week later, I moved that same overnight bag from the hallway bench to the laundry room. As I unzipped it, a small paper slipped out, a train ticket stub. Not for the town where her mom lived, but for a different city. 3 hours in the opposite direction. I stared at that stub for a long time. I remember flipping it over like it would have more to say on the back. But it was just there, silent, damning. When I brought it up to her, she didn't flinch. Oh, she said, bright and easy. I stopped in to see Jessa. You remember Jessa, right? From college? She got divorced last year. Her place is on the way, sort of. I just didn't want to complicate things. It wasn't on the way. And Jessa? Sure, I remembered her. Vaguely. Leanna hadn't mentioned her in years. Suddenly, she was worthy of a weekend detour? That's when I realized something that gutted me more than I expected. It wasn't just one thing. It was the slow fade of her honesty. The subtle shift from being my partner to being a version of herself she only showed when it was convenient. Her stories used to come with messy details, funny tangents, spilled coffee, traffic frustrations. Lately, her stories were clean, controlled, polished to the point of fiction. Even her silences started feeling curated. Like when we'd sit on the couch at night. She used to curl up against me, complain about her day, ask about mine. Now she stared at her phone, or read, or pretended to be tired. I'd ask how work was and she'd just say, busy, then go quiet. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd say, nothing. But nothing started to sound a lot like everything. I thought maybe I was going crazy. Maybe I was imagining it. I even Googled signs of burnout, maybe that was all this was. Maybe she was just tired, overwhelmed, needing space. I tried to be the guy who listened, who gave her room. But giving her room started to feel like giving her distance. And she seemed too comfortable in that distance. Then came the passwords. Leanna and I never had a rule about phones or devices. We weren't the what's mine is yours type, but we also weren't secretive. For years, her tablet was the one we both used to stream shows or order groceries. Then one day, the password changed. She said there was a software update. Something about syncing her work calendar and needing better encryption. I didn't argue. But when I tried to open it again weeks later just to pull up a recipe, I was locked out. Again. I asked. She hesitated. Then gave me some excuse about it being linked to her company email now and how she couldn't risk any compliance issues. It's boring legal stuff, she added, smiling. You don't want to mess with HR. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Even her wardrobe had changed. Not drastically, but enough. New blouses, subtler makeup, heels she used to reserve for date nights now casually worn to lunch meetings. She said it was about self-care. About reclaiming confidence. I supported that. I wanted her to feel good. But sometimes she came home looking like a woman who had been seen, touched, maybe even kissed, and not by me. I tried to talk myself down. Tried to believe her. But belief needs consistency. And nothing was consistent anymore. So I started writing things down. Not because I wanted to trap her, but because I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. Little dates, inconsistencies, places she said she'd be. Notes on changes in schedule, stories that shifted slightly depending on who was in the room. It was like trying to catch smoke. But I couldn't stop. I needed clarity. I needed something to hold onto. Because the Leanna I loved still lived in our house, slept in our bed, laughed at dumb commercials. But she also lived somewhere else now, somewhere behind her phone screen, somewhere past the clean, rehearsed answers, somewhere in that velvet pouch next to the key. A key I still hadn't asked her about again. Because I already knew. It didn't belong to a jewelry box. It belonged to a secret. By the start of the next week, the weight of my suspicions had turned into something else, resolve. I didn't want to be the guy with a notebook full of inconsistencies and no answers. I needed proof. Not theories, not interpretations. Proof. Hard, undeniable, black and white. So I crossed a line. I installed a tracker on Leanna's car. Not just GPS. The device I bought had audio capabilities. It was disguised as a simple OBD2 scanner, something you plug into the car to monitor diagnostics. It wouldn't look out of place. She wouldn't notice it. And I hated that I had done it. Hated that it felt necessary. But after 20 years of marriage, I didn't want to confront her with guesswork. If this was going to blow up, I wasn't going to be the one reaching for explanations. I was going to have the truth. For days, nothing happened. She drove to work. Drove home. Occasionally made a detour to the grocery store or gym. Normal stuff. The kind of movements you'd expect from someone with nothing to hide. I started to wonder if maybe I had gone too far, if maybe all the dots I'd connected were just coincidence. And then Thursday came. She left that morning in a rush, saying she had a meeting-heavy day. Kissed me like she meant it, which almost hurt more than if she hadn't. Around 5:30 p.m. I got a text. Staying late at the office. Big pitch tomorrow. Don't wait up. I texted back a simple got it and then opened the tracking app on my phone. She wasn't at her office. Not even close. The GPS showed her car parked near a quiet part of town, older buildings, fewer lights. Not industrial, not commercial. Residential blocks mixed with cafes and art shops. Not the kind of place you'd take a client. Definitely not where you prepped for a big pitch. I stared at the map, willing it to be wrong. Then I tapped the audio feed. At first, just static. Then, after a few seconds, voices. Muffled but distinct. A woman's voice, hers laughing. Another voice, male, deeper. I couldn't make out the words clearly, but the tone was in asterisk mate. Familiar in a way that stabbed me. I drove without thinking. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't leave a note. I just grabbed my keys and headed out, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel as I tried to stay below the speed limit. My heart thudded in my ears. The GPS pin led me to a street I hadn't visited in years, a place where people went to disappear into dim lighting and quiet corners. I found her car. Parked neatly. Nothing unusual about it except for the fact that it was here, not at the office like she said. I turned off my engine and scanned the street. It didn't take long to spot her. Through the large window of a narrow cafe, tucked into a booth near the back, partially hidden by a curtain of string lights and ferns. She was facing the window. He wasn't. Tall man. Button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up. He leaned across the table, smiling like he belonged there. Like this was their spot. Like none of this was borrowed time. She was laughing. That laugh. Quiet. Nose crinkled. Eyes shining. The one I hadn't seen in months. Not for me, anyway. Then he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. And she didn't flinch. She smiled, leaned in, and said something that made him grin. Then they kissed. Not a friendly peck. Not a brief mistake. A long, slow kiss. The kind you give someone when you think nobody's watching. The kind you give when you're used to kissing that person. My stomach turned. Something cold and metallic bloomed in my chest. I lifted my phone. Took a photo. Just one. Blurry but unmistakable. I didn't stay longer. I didn't storm in. I didn't need drama. I needed distance. I drove home in silence. When I got there, the house felt like a museum. Clean, quiet, curated. I sat on the couch and stared at nothing for what must have been an hour. My phone still open, the photo still glowing on the screen like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. She walked in at 9:22 p.m. Keys jingled. Heels clicked on the tile. She hummed something, an old song from the radio. The casual soundtrack of someone returning from work. "Hey," she said, peeking into the living room. "Still up?" "Yeah," I said. My voice felt like it came from someone else. "Long day," she said, dropping her bag by the stairs. "I'm wiped." She walked over, bent down, kissed me on the forehead. I didn't move, didn't blink. "Love you," she whispered. Then she padded upstairs, like everything was exactly the same. But everything had changed. I didn't follow her. I just sat there, staring at the last lie she would ever tell me without knowing I already knew. And that night, for the first time in our marriage, I locked the bedroom door from the inside. Not because I was angry, but because I was done. 3 days later, she invited me to a birthday party. We were sitting at the kitchen table, each pretending we were fine. Me with my coffee, her scrolling through her tablet, pretending not to watch my face. That's when she dropped it, casual and unbothered. "You remember Bryce, my boss? His birthday's this weekend. There's a party at a lounge downtown. I told him we'd come." That word hit different now. She hadn't said it in weeks. I looked up. "We?" "Yeah," she said, smiling. "I figured it might be nice. You've been working so much and I thought it'd be good for us to get out. Together." It wasn't guilt in her eyes. It wasn't excitement either. It was calculation. This wasn't about celebrating her boss. It was about optics. Whoever he was, whoever the man at the cafe was, he would be there. And she needed to look like a wife. I agreed without hesitation. Smiled. Said, "Sounds fun." I didn't trust myself to say more. That Saturday, she took 2 hours to get ready. She wore a black dress I hadn't seen before. Tight at the waist, low at the back, cut just enough to invite attention. She curled her hair, added subtle smoky eyes, and sprayed perfume I hadn't smelled on her in years. Not since our anniversary trip to Monterey, when we still thought time would always be kind to us. She looked beautiful, devastatingly so, and it hit me all at once that this was the last time I'd see her like that. Not because she was going to stop being beautiful, but because I was done pretending it was for me. The lounge was one of those semi-private venues. Soft lighting, velvet furniture, and a curated playlist that made everyone feel just a little more expensive. We walked in together, her hand resting lightly on my arm like it had 100 times before. And just like that, we were the couple again, the charming, settled, enviable pair. Except we weren't. Not anymore. People greeted her with familiarity. She smiled, nodded, introduced me in a rehearsed rhythm. "This is Ryan, my husband." But there was a stiffness to it, a delay, like she was reading it off a teleprompter in her head. And then I saw him, the man from the cafe. He was standing near the bar, chatting with a woman in a red dress. But the second he saw Leanna, his posture changed, subtle, but clear. He straightened, adjusted his collar, and smiled in a way that wasn't meant for anyone else but her. She didn't see me watching. She smiled back, brief, tight, but enough. Throughout the night, I kept my distance. Let her mingle. I made polite conversation with strangers, sipped whiskey I barely tasted, and watched her navigate the room like she belonged there in a way I no longer did. Then it happened. Someone asked her who I was. It was a man from her department, I think, older, glasses, vaguely familiar. He motioned toward me from across the room and said, "You came with someone, right? Who's that?" She hesitated, just for a beat. Then she laughed and said, "Oh, that's my ex." Her voice wasn't bitter. It wasn't playful. It was indifferent. I heard it clear as day. And so did he. And then I did something I still don't fully understand. I stepped forward, smiled, held out my hand to the man. "I'm Ryan," I said. "Her ex." She froze. The man looked between us awkwardly, then excused himself faster than I thought humanly possible. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Leanna's face didn't register guilt. It registered something worse, relief. As if I had given her permission to let the lie breathe. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered when we were alone near the restrooms. "You didn't have to make a scene." I shrugged. "You're the one who called me your ex." "You know, I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" Silence. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Don't," I said. "We left early." She blamed a headache. I didn't say a word on the drive home. Just kept my eyes on the road while her makeup smeared under the weight of tears she didn't want to explain. When we got home, she went straight upstairs. Closed the door to the bedroom. Not a slam, not dramatic. Just closed. I stayed downstairs. Poured myself a drink. Sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wood grain. That moment, hearing her refer to me in the past tense like I was already gone, did something irreversible. It wasn't just the cheating anymore. It wasn't just the lies. It was the erasure. Like the 20 years we had built together could be edited out of her biography with a casual remark and a champagne smile. She called me her ex. So I decided to become one. After that night, something in me shifted from grief to clarity. She called me her ex out loud. In public. And she didn't correct it. Didn't even flinch. That kind of detachment doesn't come from impulse, it comes from practice. From time. From already living in a world where I no longer exist. So I made a decision: I wouldn't confront her. I wouldn't scream, argue, or demand confessions. I would disappear from her life exactly the way she had started erasing me from hers quietly. And so the preparation began. It started with a spare key. I drove an hour out of town to a hardware shop we used once when our garage door broke. I had them copy the house key and cut a new one for a rental I didn't even have yet. I used a card from an old, never-closed bank account I'd opened back in college. It had maybe $300 in it. Just enough to look ordinary. Then I bought a second phone. Cheap. Prepaid. The kind people use when they don't want to be traced. I only used it for what came next: gathering. Logging. Building my exit brick by quiet brick. I started pulling phone records. Reviewing bank statements. Cross-checking dates. She said she was at one place with GPS data I quietly started collecting from the device still hidden in her car. The tracker was still there, feeding me locations, audio clips, timestamps. She never noticed. And when she did notice other things, like me being quieter or going to bed earlier, she chalked it up to me being off. Maybe she thought I was grieving already, going through some kind of depression. I let her think that. I met with a lawyer. His name was Dan. Referral from a guy at work who'd gone through something similar. Dan didn't ask a lot of questions when I showed him the folder. Just flipped through the photos, emails, maps. He nodded slowly like he'd seen this movie before. "You've got leverage," he said. "The more detailed the timeline, the cleaner your exit will be. She doesn't get to rewrite the narrative if you control the facts." I started building the timeline that night. Every call. Every detour. Every lie. I organized it all in a file titled Final Draft and backed it up in 3 separate cloud accounts. Just in case. I also printed copies, kept one in my car, another in my toolbox at work, and a third in the attic behind the insulation. Not because I thought she'd find them, but because having them out of reach helped me breathe. I began removing my personal belongings, one drawer at a time. Family heirlooms went into a storage unit under my cousin's name. Photos from our early years, honeymoon in Hawaii, the trip to Iceland, the goofy ones in matching sweaters, those I scanned, stored digitally, then left behind. I wanted them to haunt her. The tools in the garage, my signed baseball, the cufflinks from my father, I took them all. Slowly. Strategically. She didn't notice. Her life was too busy, too curated. If I left her a note taped to the fridge saying, "You never looked closely," she'd think it was poetic. It wouldn't even offend her. The apartment came next. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, but clean and quiet. Top floor, corner unit. No neighbors on one side. I paid the first 2 months in cash. The landlord didn't ask questions. I bought a new mattress. A second-hand desk. A set of dishes. Basics only. There was something peaceful about building a space from scratch while your old life was still running on autopilot. It felt like being in two places at once, one version of me still eating dinner with Leanna, the other already moved out and gone. She didn't notice when my toolbox vanished. Didn't notice the missing sweaters, the books I had tucked away. She didn't even notice when I stopped wearing my wedding ring. I left it on the bathroom counter one morning. When I came home that night, it was gone. She never mentioned it. Never asked why I'd taken it off. Maybe she assumed it was a statement. Maybe she liked pretending it wasn't. One night, I came home late from work. Really, I had driven out to the apartment to hang curtains. She was asleep on the couch when I walked in. Wine glass half empty, TV still humming in the background. She looked peaceful. Detached. Like a stranger using my house as a set for a show she no longer wanted to be in. I stood there for a long time just watching her. Not with anger. Not even sorrow. Just distance. This was the woman I had built a life with. And she was already gone. The next day I met with Dan again. Gave him the updated file. Every photo was timestamped. Every audio clip transcribed. Every bank charge matched to a location. The cafe. The hotel. The day she claimed she was visiting her mom but ended up in another city. This is solid, Dan said, tapping the folder. We can file when you're ready. I'll let you know, I said. Then I did one more thing. I wrote the letter. It was short. Direct. Honest. Not cruel. Not poetic. Just clear. I told her that I knew. That I had known for longer than she thought. That I had watched her pull away piece by piece and that I refused to chase someone who had already left. I thanked her for the good years. Acknowledged that people change. Said I hoped she found what she was looking for. But I wouldn't be standing still anymore. At the end, I wrote 4 words. You ended this quietly. So will I. I signed it, folded it once, and placed it in an envelope with my wedding ring. I didn't leave it right away. Not yet. But I kept it in the drawer of my nightstand. So I could see it. So I'd remember that I wasn't imagining the end. It was here. It was real. And soon it would be official. It happened on a Tuesday. She left early that morning, claiming she had back-to-back meetings and a team lunch that might run late. She kissed my cheek like she always did, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. 10 minutes after her car pulled out of the driveway, I placed the envelope on our bed. Inside, the letter, my wedding ring, and a flash drive containing everything: photos, audio clips, timestamps, GPS logs. I left no ambiguity, no gaps. Just truth. Cold and whole. I didn't slam doors. I didn't pack in a frenzy. I took what I had already moved to the apartment. Everything else, clothes, toiletries, coffee mug, socks, felt like relics of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. Before I left, I walked through the house one last time. Our house. I touched the walls. Paused at the wedding photo still hanging in the hallway. 2 kids smiling into a future they couldn't yet imagine. I didn't take it down. I wanted her to see it. Then I turned off my phone, pulled the SIM card out, and left it on the kitchen table next to the keys. And I left. No message. No explanation beyond the truth she'd find when she got home. I didn't want to see her reaction. I didn't want apologies or justifications. I didn't want closure through conversation. I had already closed the door in my heart. By the time she came back that night, I was gone. She called, texted, emailed. Nothing reached me. She showed up at my office. I had already left my resignation letter on my manager's desk. I started a freelance contract remotely 2 days later. She messaged mutual friends. I had already explained enough to those who mattered. The silence was deafening for her. For me, it was peace. 18 months passed. My new life wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet. Intentional. The apartment turned into a house, a modest place near the lake where the mornings were still and the evenings smelled like pine. I spent the first few months rebuilding my workshop. Lost hours with my hands, wood, tools, quiet music in the background. Therapy helped too. It gave me a place to untangle the parts of myself I'd neglected during those years of slow unraveling. And then came Mary. She owned the flower shop 2 blocks from my house. We started talking over bouquets, of all things. She had a soft voice, a grounded laugh, and a past that didn't scare her. A widow. She knew about grief. She knew about rebuilding. It wasn't fast or fiery or cinematic. It was slow, gentle, real. When my son, Oliver, found out what had happened, when I finally told him everything, he stopped talking to Leanna. I didn't ask him to. I never would. But he said, "Dad, I saw it in your face. I know you tried. And I know she didn't." He visits often now. Helps with the yard. Brings Mary sunflowers. One spring afternoon, we went to a local fair. I hadn't planned on going, but Mary insisted. Said I needed more color in my life. And that's when I saw her. Leanna. Older now? A little thinner. Eyes tired. She was with a man. Not the one from the cafe. This one was yelling, red in the face, frustrated about something small. She looked past him, distracted, and that's when she saw me. Our eyes met. She froze. I didn't. I gave her a small nod. The same way I did the night she called me her ex. Then I turned and walked away. For good.